Welcome back to the MOOC course on qualitative research methods. My name is Aradhana Malik and I'm helping you with this course. And we've been talking about various things, and in the previous lecture we started a discussion on writing as a method of inquiry. Now today we will take that discussion forward. So let's see what we have today. This is again from this paper by Richardson in the Handbook of Qualitative Research Methods. I have used that book as a guide for this course, and if possible, please have your library purchase that book. If possible, please buy that book. It's it's a very nice book to have as a reference. It's difficult to understand, but it's an amazingly informative book written by experts in their fields. So it's a very nice book that you can have. Now this is the information that I'm going to share with you is from that book. Okay, so we were talking about various things in writing, and we stopped at writing stories. We talked about the significance of writing stories. We talked about microprocess. We did not get a chance to finish this, so I'll first finish this and move on. We were talking about what writing stories were. I showed you Rachel Tour's page, and then we were talking about writing stories being narratives about contexts in which writing is produced. Now there's microprocess writing stories deal with how the process of writing passages and reading them back to yourself open new questions and issues that feedback and emanate from the earlier passages, and how is a changed self evoked through the hands-on, eyes-on feedback process. So when we go through whatever we have written, it stimulates our mind to think about what we have written. It stimulates our mind to revise what we have written, to modify, to develop a deeper understanding into what we have written, and that in turn feeds back. So we talk about the changed self being evoked through the hands-on, which means writing, eyes-on feedback process. We are thinking, we are also looking at what we have written, and that feeds into itself, and that becomes much more pronounced when we use technology. We use the computer, so the font, the color of the font on the screen, the shape of the font, everything has an impact. If you have been used to reading books that have been printed in a very nice, easy to read font, that have been printed, that have little or no spelling mistakes and grammatical errors, that have been written in an easy to understand format, you will like reading books. On the other hand, if they are printed, if you have not had access to books that have been printed in a very good on a very good quality page, where pages crack, or where it's not difficult to see the font, the print standing out from the page, where it becomes difficult on the eyes, where it becomes difficult to find the information that you're looking for, then you may not be very inclined to reading. So it influences your willingness to read. Secondly, the material that you see, what you read, invokes, it stimulates certain ideas, it stimulates certain ways of thinking in your mind. So when you read something that you have written, it acts as a feedback process. It helps you think about what you have written. Once you have expressed yourself in finite language, that creates a boundary around what you were thinking, that gives a shape to the way you were thinking. It then helps you direct your attention, and it also reminds you, it helps you revise what you have written in light of what you wanted to write. So if what you have written takes a different shape than what you wanted to write, or takes a different direction from the one you had intended, then after you have written it, reading what you have written helps you revisit what you wanted to do and what the outcome was. And then you refine your ideas. Then you say, no, maybe I developed a different kind of understanding. Maybe this is not the way I wanted to express myself. It's giving a different impression to the reader. Maybe I wanted to write differently. So, it becomes a self-feedback kind of mechanism. Just reading something gives you an insight into clarifying the ideas, or it gives you an insight into the ideas that are developing, that are taking shape in your mind, in and through your own thinking process. So we discussed this. Now we will now move on to crystallization. We referred to crystallization when we talked about methodology on slide 171. When you have access to these slides, you will see, and this was from a paper by Jańczyk. And we talked about, I'll just revise this a little bit, crystallization recognizes the many facets of any given approach to the social world as a fact of life. The crystal combines symmetry and substance with an infinite variety of shapes, substances, transmutations, multidimensionalities and angles of approach. Crystals grow, change and alter, but they are not amorphous. They have a shape, they have a boundary. They may grow, they may modify, they may be, things may be added on, but the core of the crystal remains the same. The direction in which the crystal is growing remains pretty much predefined. So, it's not that the shape can change. The shape remains the same. You may be adding on, but the basic unit of the crystal remains the same. What we see when we view a crystal depends on how we view it, how we hold it up to the light or not. You view a crystal in darkness, you see something different. You hold it up against light coming from the right side. Here there is a big lamp on the roof, that is focusing on my face. There's another one here. So if I hold up the crystal in the middle of these two lamps, it will look different. When I hold it up against one lamp, I'll see something different. When I hold it up against the other lamp, I'll see something different. So, how we view a situation will define what we see in that crystal. Crystallization provides us with a deepened, complex, thoroughly partial understanding of the topic. Paradoxically, we know more and doubt what we know. And that is what writing does. When we give a shape to our writing, we realize, oh my God, here is what I thought I could add, here is what I thought I had added, and here is what I've missed, and this is the direction in which it is going. On the other hand, after we write things down, they may stimulate some more ideas in our minds that we had never thought of adding to the written text. Criteria for evaluation of papers submitted for publication. So we talked about publication as a tangible output of the work that we did through qualitative or any other kind of research. Now, how are papers evaluated? And I think this is going to be very, very helpful for people in research, for research scholars. How are papers evaluated? The first thing that reviewers look for is substantive contribution. Does this piece contribute to our understanding of social life? Does the writer demonstrate a deeply grounded, if embedded, social scientific perspective? How has this perspective informed the construction of text? What is the writer trying to say? Has the writer written in a way that the writer is, or is the writing style, is the genre, is the position the writer has taken coherent with the research position that the writer has taken? Is the writer an informant of social processes? Is the writer an inquirer into social processes? Is the writer a solver of social processes? Is the writer against what is going on in the social world? What is the writer trying to do, and does the writing style also reflect that or not? And does all of this make a substantive contribution? Is there substance? Is there meat? Is it unique? Is it valuable enough for anyone to read it? The other thing is aesthetic merit. Does this piece succeed aesthetically? Does the use of creative analytic practices open up the text, invite interpretive responses? Is the text artistically shaped, satisfying, complex and not boring? What is there in the text? One, what is being written? Two, how has it been written? Is it stimulating my thinking? Is it challenging enough? Is it simple enough for the intended reader to understand? If it's too complex, then readers will lose interest. If it's too simple, even then readers will lose interest. If it's and I keep repeating this because I see this happening more and more with the over dependence on computer programs to correct the way we write. We don't even want to use our own training to write grammatically correct language, whichever language we are writing in. Could be English, could be Hindi, could be any other language. But we depend so much on computer programs. So, aesthetics also includes The one is of course the genre, the position the writer is taking. The second thing is grammatical correctness. It's so simple, it's so implicit that it's not even mentioned in this text, but this is a problem that we teachers see more and more with the advent of technology. And over dependence of students on technology. Is the piece that is written grammatically, typographically accurate or not? We don't proofread. We are supposed to proofread. We should proofread, because if we do not proofread, if we do not check whatever we have written for grammatical errors, for archaic expressions. I have one student who is very fond of using archaic old expressions in the hope of being perceived as somebody who's this student, he or she wants to be perceived as somebody very, very knowledgeable, and unfortunately that is the training we receive in our schools, that if we use very difficult words, if we use very archaic old time expressions, the reader will perceive us as somebody brilliant, and that is not the case. There are some phrases that are totally out of context, there are some phrases that are totally out of date, and so we like to use these difficult words. This one example that comes to mind is the word juxtaposition. Now there is a difference between juxtaposition and superimposition, and it sounds very difficult, so you'll write the word juxtaposed, something was juxtaposed with another. You are intending that term A was replaced by term B, but you say term A was juxtaposed with term B, and that one lets the reader know that you don't know what you're talking about. Then two, it also gives the reader an impression that you're trying to overtly going out of your way to over impress the reader, which leaves a very bad taste in the reader's mouth. So that can negatively affect, it can hamper your chances of publication. Please don't do that. And then if something needs to be written simply, you must write it simply. On the other hand, if you need to use jargon as research students, by all means use jargon, use the correct terminology to represent whatever you're writing, and your paper will get published. Okay. Does this piece succeed aesthetically? Does the use of creative analytic practices open up the text? Does whatever you have written stimulate the reader to think more about what you have written? The idea is to give the reader an insight into whatever is going on and have them do something about it, want to learn more about what you have written. Do they want to interpret the way you have presented the text or not? If they are stimulated to do so, then your text is worthy of being published. That is one very important factor that reviewers look for when they read papers that are submitted for publication. Okay. Reflexivity. Especially in qualitative research, reflexivity is of utmost importance. Is the author cognizant of the epistemology of postmodernism? How did the author come to write this text? How was the information gathered? Are there ethical issues? We don't want to pay attention to this. Are there ethical issues? How has the author's subjectivity been both a producer and produced awareness and self-exposure for the reader to make judgments about the point of view? Does the author hold himself or herself accountable to the standards of knowing and telling of the people he or she has studied? So, is the author reviewing whatever he or she has written? Have ethical standards been followed? Where did this text come from? Why did the text come from? How was the information gathered? Were people asked for their permission or not? Were they, were they contacted? Did the author keep the interests of the stakeholders in mind, etc.? So that is another criterion for publication. Then impact. Why would somebody want to publish whatever you have written? Does this affect me emotionally, intellectually? Does it generate new questions? Does it move me to write? Does it move me to write new research, to try new research practices? Does it move me to action? If what you have written does not stimulate any action from the reader, the chances of it being published go down significantly. Is it stimulating intellectually? Does it move the reader to think about newer ways, to think about newer things? If not, then is the piece of writing affecting the reader either emotionally or intellectually? Is it stimulating some sort of action, some sort of further research, further inquiry, then the chances of getting published increase. Then expression of reality. Does this text embody a fleshed out, embodied sense of lived experience, especially in qualitative research? Does it seem true, a credible account of a cultural, social, individual or communal sense of the real, or is it modified? Is it really true? Is this really happening? Does it seem? One is something being true and real. The other is representation of that being, that truth or reality. So does the way the text has been presented seem real? Sometimes what we as writers do is we highlight the significant events in a particular culture, with the result the normal life is so fleshed out, it's flushed out, not fleshed out, it is completely filtered out. With the result, all we are left with is a collection of significant experiences. So extremes of good experiences and extremes of bad experiences, extremes of very pleasant experiences, extremes of very unpleasant experiences, and put together it doesn't look real. We forget to add, we forget to make connections, we leave out these connections between the extreme good and the not so extreme good, and the neutral, and then not so extreme bad and extreme bad. So there should be some sort of a smoothness in the way some sort of a continuity in the way we present our ideas, and sometimes we forget that. And when we do that, then all of this, it just seems like a collection of extremes of experience, which is not the way real life happens. Okay, so that continuity needs to be there. Okay. Writing practices. Writing, the creative effort should come first, at least for some part of every day of your life. Is a wonderful blessing if you use it. You will become happier, more enlightened, alive, impassioned, light-hearted and generous to everybody else. Even your health will improve, colds will disappear and all other ailments of discouragement and boredom. Now this is by a lady called Brenda Willand, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, and she's written about what writing does to us physically. And this text has been quoted in research in Richardson's paper, and I've picked it up from there and presented it to you. Please get into the habit of writing something every day. What I advise to my students is just the way you get up and brush your teeth in the morning, sleep at night, you must be having a routine. You get up, you brush your teeth, you go for a run, you take a bath, you have your breakfast at a certain time, you have your lunch at a certain time, you have your dinner at a certain time, you have your cups of tea at a certain time. Similarly, please slot maybe half an hour for writing every day. Write about what you learnt in that day and sit and write. Either have slot a fixed period of time where you don't pick up your pen or you don't move from your keyboard, you're not playing games, you're not thinking about anything else, you're not on Facebook, you're just writing about what you learnt about this project that you undertook. And with qualitative research, you can at least, you can always cut out pieces that seem too biased. You can always cut out whatever may not be relevant for that particular type of publication. But at the same time, if you make a deliberate effort to pouring your heart out about the new ideas that you have picked up every day, you get into that routine, it becomes addictive, and then you look at it after a week and you see how much you have learned. You will say, I started from here and I learned this and I added and I added and I added, and you add 2 paragraphs every day. At the end of the week, you have 14 paragraphs and maybe 5 or 6 pages, and then you see how much progress you have made. And it gives you a chance to vent, so it has a psychological impact and it's very good. And that's what Brenda talks about in this in the piece that Richardson has quoted. Okay, metaphor. We talked about a little bit about metaphor. In traditional scientific writing, the metaphor used most commonly for theory is that of a construction, and we talked about this in the previous class. Now, you could consider alternative sensory metaphors for knowledge other than the heliocentric one mentioned in the text. What happens when we rethink, resense knowledge as situated in voice, in touch, etc. Look at one of your papers and highlight your metaphors and images. This is one way of seeing how you use metaphors. What are you saying through metaphors that you did not realize you were saying? What are you re-inscribing? Do you want to re-inscribe what you're re-inscribing? Can you find different metaphors that change how you see or feel the material? and your relationship to it? Are your mixed metaphors pointing to confusion in yourself or to social sciences glossing over of ideas? So you try to identify how the different metaphors you use in your writing or daily usage of your preferred language shape your knowing and writing. Some of us prefer living metaphors. I like to use metaphors of living things. I like the metaphor of plants and trees and mammals. Especially in the animal kingdom, I'm very fond of mammals. You know, we all have our preferences. So I use mammalian metaphors quite a bit. I use the metaphors of sturdy plants like trees and shrubs. And so we have our personal choices. I have friends who like to use the metaphors of the atmosphere, so breeze and wind, and I mean they look for things in the physical world around them, stones and rock and etc. So you know, you find these metaphors and see how they shape your writing. Okay. Writing formats: choose a journal article that exemplifies the mainstream writing conventions of your discipline. Find out how the argument is staged, who is the presumed audience, how does the paper inscribe ideology, how does the author claim authority over the material, what is the author trying to say, and how does the author defend the claims he or she makes. Where is the author? Is the author talking in third person, in first person, in second person? Is the author moving or is the author stationary? Where are you in this paper? So what is the author informing you about, which means what is the author treating the reader as? Who are the subjects and who are the objects of research? What is it that the author is talking about and why and how? Choose a journal article that exemplifies excellence in qualitative research and find out how the article has built upon the normative social science writing. How is authority claimed? What has the author done to prove, or what is the author saying to prove that the new knowledge has been created a certain way? How is the author defending his or her point of view? Where is the author? Where are you in the article? Who are the subjects and who are the objects of research? Okay, choose a paper that you have written for a class that you have published that you think is good, and then you revisit everything. How did you follow the norms of your discipline? Were you conscious of doing so, or did it come automatically? How did you stage your paper? Which parts did the professor say were good? How did you depend on those norms to carry your argument? What voices did you exclude in your writing? What did you include? Who was the intended audience? Who ended up being the intended audience? Where are you? How do you feel about the paper now that you have learnt about research and you've read other things? How do you feel about your processes of constructing the written piece? Okay. The writer's object is or should be to hold the reader's attention. The reader should want to turn the page and keep on turning till the end. The reader should not lose interest in the middle. This is accomplished only when the narrative moves steadily ahead, not when it comes to a weary standstill, overlaced with every item uncovered in the research. So it should keep moving. There should be a smoothness. There should be a connection. I have a student who jumps from idea to idea, and the connections are not very sound, and it's becoming, you know, sometimes, you know, I have to sit with this student and explain to him or her that, look, we need to make these connections and the transition needs to be smooth. So the reader cannot have these jerks. Many times the student oversimplifies things and the discussion just comes to a standstill, and the reader doesn't know where to look next. So there should be enough interest in every paragraph to take it to the next paragraph. At the same time, there should be a smooth connection. Creative analytic writing practices: join or start a writing group, work through a creative writing guidebook, enroll in a creative writing workshop or class. Some of the ways in which you can enhance, improve your creative analytic writing. Use writing up your field notes as an opportunity to expand your writing vocabulary, habits of thought and attentiveness to your senses, and as a bulwark against the censorious voice of science. You can write observation notes which include the details of observation. You can make methodological notes which are messages to self during observation regarding process of data collection. You can make theoretical notes which are hunches, hypotheses, post-structuralist connections, critiques of what the researcher is doing, thinking or seeing. You can also have your personal notes and you can label them like that. You know, you can ON, MN, TN, PN, personal notes are uncensored feeling statements about the research, the people the researcher is talking to, the researcher's doubts, anxieties and pleasures, your assumptions, your biases, your prejudices, everything can go into these personal notes. Label it as personal notes. Okay. Keep a journal, make a diary, write a writing autobiography, experiment with transforming an in-depth interview into a poetic representation. You could write a poem, just get creative. Use all of these notes later to format your writing in the way the journal needs it, in the way your supervisor needs it. But in the beginning, I tell my students to just open their hearts out. Put everything down, because you're likely to forget these things. Then slowly you can find yourself in the text, you can find your voice in the text, you can cut things later. But when you are going through the process, pour your heart out and write as much as you like. Try writing using different typefaces, font sizes and textual placement. How have the traditional ways of using print affected what you know and how you know it? Write a layered text, which is a strategy for putting yourself into your text and putting your text into the literatures and traditions of social science. So different layers. Try the seamless text, in which previous literature, theory and methods are placed in textually meaningful ways rather than in disjunctive sections. Try the sandwich text, in which traditional social science themes are the white bread around the filling, and the filling is what you have done. Try an epilogue explicating the theoretical analytic framework of the creative text. So, with various writing practices that you can use. Consider a fieldwork setting, consider the various subject positions you've had within it. Write about the setting from several different subject positions. Different points of view can dialogue with each other, they can talk to each other. Consider the paper, consider paper you have written. What have you left out? Who is not present? Who has been repressed or marginalized? Rewrite the text from the point of view of somebody who you think has been missed. Write your data in three ways, for example, as a narrative account, as a poetic representation and as a reader's theatre. What do you know in each rendition that you did not know in other renditions? In a poetic representation, your emotions are likely to surface. In a narrative account, your emotions are likely to be completely suppressed. In a reader's theatre, they are likely to be mixed up. So, which position do you want to include? You need to mention your assumptions. At the same time, they should not overpower what you're trying to present. Try writing the same piece of research for an academic audience, a trade audience, the popular press, policymakers, research hosts and so on. So, you can try different writing practices. And so, various ways in which we can explicate, we can describe what we have done, and you can put all of this together and format what you are doing in a way that it becomes acceptable to the research community. But at the very beginning, I would really encourage you to just pour your heart out and write everything that comes to your mind in whichever shape or form it comes to your mind. And remember, and this is really the punchline of today's of this particular lecture, this is what I keep telling my students. You must be prepared to revise your text at least 40 to 50 times, whether you're doing qualitative research or quantitative research. Anytime you want a paper to become publishable, the minimum number of revisions required for any writer, for anybody who has a moderate amount of grasp over the language. I'm not talking about people who don't who are struggling with the language they are writing in. I'm talking about people who have a good grasp over the language. The minimum number of revisions required is 40 to 50. If you really want your paper published in a good journal, be prepared for it. If you get by with a fewer number of revisions, that's a bonus. But be prepared to revise your text at least 40 to 50 times before you can hope to get it published, before you even submit it. Writing is hard work. Writing is tough. But writing gives you results that nothing else can. Once the paper is published, you have it in your hand and your name is at the top as the first author. That is such a big boost, because that's a permanent record of your having added something to the knowledge base that did not exist earlier. It's difficult, like all good things are. Okay, so that's where we'll stop now. Thank you very much for listening. We'll continue with some more discussion on qualitative research in the next class. Thank you.